Hi, this is Bill Carmody again with a review of the dominant type chords, the dominant seventh and the leading tone seventh chords, chapters 11 and 12. The dominant seventh chord is defined as a major triad with a minor seventh. So the triad is a major chord, and then you add a minor seventh to it. In macro analysis, use a capital letter for the major triad and use just the number 7 to indicate there's a minor seventh above the root of the chord. In Roman numeral analysis, the dominant seventh chord is always written as a 5 chord, a 5-7. So depending on the position, it could be a 5-7 in root position or a 5-6-5 in first inversion where the third is in the bass. 5-4-3 means the fifth is in the bass, and a 5-4-2 means that the seventh is in the bass. When you're writing these chords, these dominant seventh chords, the seventh, and actually a leading tone seventh chord too, the seventh resolves down. It might be a half step, might be a whole step, but to whatever note is a step below in the next chord. So if the note that is a step below is in the next chord, then the seventh should resolve down. The third of the dominant seventh chord is the leading tone of the scale, T, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, T. And if it's in an outer voice, the soprano or the bass, then it needs to resolve normally, which T goes up a half step to do. If it's in an inner voice, it's not so important, but if it's in the soprano or bass, the leading tone needs to resolve up a half step to the tonic. So that's what these voice leadings are. 7 goes to 8, that's the leading tone that pulls up. 2 goes to 1, pulls down, etc. And when you combine all these notes that are active and unstable and need to resolve, you combine them all together and they create a dominant seventh chord. And if you use all the resolutions, the 7 goes up to 8 and the 2 goes down to 1 and so on, then you're going to end up with a tonic chord. That's why the dominant seventh, 5-7, resolves to a 1 chord. The fifth, the so, do, re, mi, fa, so, can either stay on so it becomes the fifth of the tonic chord, or it can go up a step to la, which is the 6th of the scale, and that would create a 6 chord, a minor chord, 6. So those are your resolutions for the dominant seventh chord, either a 1 chord or a 6 chord. The leading tone seventh chords are also dominant type chords, and that means that they lead to the tonic. They have pulling tendencies. They still have the active notes that a dominant seventh chord has, without the root of the dominant seventh chord. So it's the leading tone and the triad, the thirds built above the leading tone. So if it's all minor thirds above the root of the chord, then that'll create a diminished seventh chord. And if the triad is a minor third, has all minor thirds, so it becomes a diminished triad with a minor seventh above the root of the chord, then that's called a half diminished seventh. So the only difference is the seventh of the chord a minor seventh or a diminished seventh. And the leading tone chords, the diminished seventh, fully diminished seventh, is more common in a minor key, because as you can see in this example in C minor, the A would be flat because of the key signature. So B, D, F, A flat is a fully diminished seventh chord, where in C major, B, D, F, A natural creates a half diminished seventh chord. What makes these chords active and want to resolve is that they contain a tritone. And a tritone is 3 whole steps, and it can be written as a diminished fifth or an augmented fourth, and depending on how it's written will determine how it resolves, which note is considered the leading tone. So if it's a diminished fifth, it'll collapse in to a major third, and if it's written as an augmented fourth, it'll expand out to a minor sixth. And the cool thing about the fully diminished seventh chords is that they have two tritones. Between the root and the fifth is one tritone, and between the third and the seventh is the other tritone. And as we just saw, either note in a tritone can be considered the leading tone. So, with a fully diminished seventh chord, any note of the four notes can be considered the leading tone of the chord. It might have to be rewritten enharmonically, but so if the leading tone, which is the root, resolves up a half step, there are four possible resolutions. So in this example, this first example with an F sharp diminished seventh, if F sharp is the root, the chord will resolve to a G chord. F sharp will go up to a G. If A is the root, then it'll resolve to up a half step to a B flat chord. If C is the root, it'll go up a half step to D flat chord. And if E flat, which would be rewritten as D sharp, is the root, it would go up a half step to E natural. Now, there are three examples of diminished seventh chords, and only three. And these are the three. So one that has an F sharp in it, one that has a G in it, one that has a G sharp in it. And those are the resolutions for each of those three types of, they're all the same type, but they're each examples of diminished seventh chords. So if you take any note of a diminished seventh chord, any one of the four notes, and you lower that note a half step, it'll change the diminished seventh chord into a dominant seventh chord, into a 5/7, and then the resolution of the chord is clear. If you make this F sharp diminished seventh chord and you lower the F sharp to an F natural, now it becomes an F7 chord, which is a 5/7 of B flat. So it only has one resolution once you do that. Here is a sample quiz, and take a look at it. And if you have any questions that are unclear, look in your book, look in the Music Solutions, look at this podcast, or ask questions in class. All right, good luck. See ya.